It was so close that Chris Buescher's team had to get an explanation from NASCAR. Let's talk about NASCAR's closest finish ever in the Heartland at Kansas Speedway. Hello everybody, welcome to Dirty Air. I'm your host Alex Lambert, and let's talk about NASCAR at Kansas in the Heartland, where we just saw the closest finish in NASCAR history. The scoring monitor had it wrong at first. They had Chris Buescher edging out Kyle Larson. In the end, NASCAR went back, reviewed, and saw Kyle Larson using high-tech, high-speed cameras. Actually saw that Kyle Larson edged out Chris Buescher. That team eventually needed an explanation. Let's talk about everything that took place in this finish. We'll go through the finishing order. We'll go through the playoff grid really quick. Let's talk about everything that just happened in one of the best races I've ever seen throughout the entire race. And of course, one of those fantastic classic finishes once again at Kansas. Let's go ahead and get into it and talk about the finish. Kyle Larson edges out Chris Buescher to win this race. You can take a look at it here. Kyle Larson trying to ride the high lane. Kyle Larson always been trying to ride the high lane his whole career, but especially at this racetrack recently with the new car, able to edge out Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher going for his first win since, I believe, Michigan last season, obviously going for his first win of the season, and heartbreak for him. He actually thought he won it. The scoring pylon showed that Chris Buescher won this race, and you can see just how close it is, but NASCAR had to go back, take another look, and this was very controversial for a little bit. Chris Buescher in his post-race interview said, he didn't see it. Actually, Scott Graves, the crew chief, Chris Buescher's team, the 17 team, actually had to go back to the NASCAR hauler. They wanted an explanation. They wanted to make sure that it wasn't because of how the start-finish line was painted. Because if you look at a few pictures, the start-finish line where Larson crossed it was actually painted a little bit farther back than where Chris Buescher crossed the line on the apron. So that was a point of conversation as well. NASCAR had to go and explain what happened. But here's the picture that I really like, and I wish Fox would have spent a little more time on this and maybe showed this, because it was the closest finish in NASCAR history ever, right? NASCAR Cup Series race. But this is the picture NASCAR posted a few moments after Fox went off air on the Twitter pages where I saw this. This is the high definition camera. I believe this camera actually came from the infield, so behind the pit road wall, and this shows clearly this is the high definition camera. Other sports use this camera as well. I know the Tour de France uses a camera very similar to this because they have a lot of close finishes, but this shows where Kyle Larson exactly was able to just edge out Chris Buescher. So there's no paint involved. It's a high definition, high speed camera, high tech that determined the winner. So obviously seeing this explanation from NASCAR, giving this explanation to Chris Buescher is huge relief from everybody involved, because we don't want to leave this racetrack with uncertainty that was the right call. We didn't want it to be just NASCAR. We know it wasn't. At least I don't think, that most people would think it was favoritism to work towards Kyle Larson or something of that nature. But you don't want that to even be a point of conversation. You want a clear-cut explanation on who the winner was. NASCAR gave that to us, so props to them. And I really like that we saw that camera. Once again, I wish Fox would have showed this camera, because that's a big part of the story, is this high-definition camera. That takes out all the equation. It wasn't based off paint. It wasn't based off any camera specifically. It was based off a high-definition camera that told you who the winner was. So certainly just insane race from start to finish. And we can talk about the whole race from start to finish. I mean, I have my big three drivers that I picked, and I'm obviously going to pick Larson, Chris Buescher, and Denny Hamlin. But there was a time in this race, the first stage, Denny Hamlin, Ross Chastain battling the entire first stage. I mean, just side by side, trading the lead every lap. Same thing with the second stage. Had a few other drivers in there. Ty Gibbs, Kyle Busch in the last run had a good shot to go up there and try to take the lead away. Truex Jr. was coming up at the end, trying to save fuel in the final run. Just an ultimate race from start to finish. One of the best races I've ever watched. I feel like every time we come to Kansas, I say this is the best Kansas race ever. I remember in 2019, I believe it was, with the 550 Gen 6 package. After that race, I was like, wow, best race at Kansas I've ever seen. I think I say that every time we go to Kansas. It just gets better. It's so good. And when you talk about Kansas, Atlanta, these mile-and-a-half tracks, but especially Kansas, especially Atlanta, man, these tracks are the best tracks on the NASCAR schedule right now. Just super exciting to see what we saw today, and outstanding driving by everybody involved. Kyle Larson ripping the wall, Chris Buescher trying to save fuel at the end and then racing hard at the end, Chase Elliott coming up to finish third. Just incredible. But Denny Hamlin, once again, I have him in my top three drivers as well, was super fast all day, just got caught up on that restart, sort of got jumped by everybody else and just fell back just a little bit. He was the lead car on that final overtime restart. We did have an overtime restart for Kyle Busch spinning, winning. And Kyle Busch actually came back to finish 8th, by the way, but we'll get into that a little bit. So yeah, those are my big 3 cars of the day. Larson was fast all race long, was extremely fast, got caught in traffic a little bit on pit because of some pit road issues mid-race, but was able to come back up, ultimately get the win. Chris Buescher, I mean, man, closest finish ever. How do you not give it to him? The second place is your big 3 driver. Super fast, Chris Buescher, and then, of course, Denny Hamlin, who led a bunch of laps in this race, looked to be the guy coming to the win. Hey, Hamlin's won a few on overtime restarts, and he lost today on an overtime restart. That's how it goes in NASCAR, and you have to prepare for those. But Hamlin just could not get going on that final restart to get the win in the end of this race. But let's go ahead and go through the entire top 10. Once again, Kyle Larson and Chris Buescher, your top 2 in the photo finish. Nice recovery from Chase Elliott. Or I wouldn't say recovery, but nice finish because Chase Elliott really wasn't in the top 5 all day long. I mean, Chase Elliott, shoot, a few more yards, maybe Chase Elliott would have been in this photo finish. We could have had a 4-wide photo finish with Truex and Elliott involved, but nice finish for Chase Elliott to finish 3rd. Once again, a really good season turning out to be for Chase Elliott, proving that he's a championship threat now, coming, following the 12th race of the season. Martin Truex Jr., same thing, probably the best driver, or definitely the best driver that doesn't have a win. He's 2nd in regular season points right now, has come very close to getting wins this season, just can't quite get it done. But Martin Truex Jr., another great 4th place finish for that 19 team. Denny Hamlin, mentioned him as my big 3 driver. Solid 5th place finish for him, top 5 day, but definitely could have went for the win if things had worked out a little better for him. Was going to win this race, I must mention, if there was no caution at the end for Kyle Busch. Christopher Bell ultimately finishing in the 6th position, so sort of salvaging a run of bad luck or a stretch of bad luck for him. Didn't finish a single race last month, 4 DNFs in a row, comes back to finish 6th. Alex Bowman, solid run for him, finishing the top 10 once again, 7th place. Kyle Busch was able to recover from an awful day. This was a great weekend for Kyle Busch. You go back to the 4th place finish last week, got stage points. He got stage points today, led a little bit late in the race. Obviously, Larson was a little faster on those late restarts, but Kyle Busch did lead some. Was able to clear Larson a couple of times, later in the race. It looked like Busch had a good chance to go for the win. Maybe it was like 8 laps ago. He spun out, but was able to go from 22nd, 20th, all the way up to 8th on 2 laps. What an incredible run for Kyle Busch, and a car that typically has a lot of dirty air involved. It's harder to pass, as mentioned. Was able to come all the way back up to 8th. Great finish for him. Noah Gragson, once again, another great solid day for Noah Gragson. Is sort of becoming the top tier guy at SHR. They were talking to him during the rain delay. Once again, this race did have like a 3.5 hour rain delay. They talked to Noah Gragson and Noah Gragson's crew chief. They explained how they're trying to get better, how they're trying to hit on certain things, and that's obviously working. Another top 10 for Noah Gragson in his 2nd Cup Series season. A great run right now for Noah Gragson in his first year at SHR. Is really, sort of taking the pedestal, him and his crew chief, of becoming that top SHR team. And right now they're qualifying better. They're probably qualifying pretty good. I think Gragson started 3rd today, maybe. And then, of course, once again, another top 10 for that team. Very impressive. Michael McDowell was able to use some strategy on the final run to get a solid top 10 finish. So congrats to Michael McDowell in the 34 car for getting a solid top 10 finish. Been a really rough season for Michael McDowell in the 34 car if you compare it, to seasons past, like 2021, like last year. Compared to those seasons, it's been a rough year for McDowell. So a top 10 finish is certainly very solid nonetheless. We did have a few big crashes in this race. All of those at the start of stage 2. We went caution-free stage 1 and 2. And then we had a string of, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 cautions there to start out stage 3. At least 4 cautions there. We had Jimmy Johnson get involved in an ugly accident with Corey LaJoie. That was sort of a storyline there where Jimmy Johnson was upset, walked all the way back out to the racetrack and stared Corey LaJoie down. A little bit of drama there where Johnson was upset. We don't see Johnson get upset very often, but certainly he was. And I think this was just a racing deal. You see just, Johnson just had to check up. I think there was some chatter on the radio from the spotter telling him to check up because of some trouble up front. And then ultimately LaJoie just kind of runs in the back of him a little bit there. So it's certainly just one of those racing incidents where Jimmy Johnson does get caught up in an accident. Bubba Wallace was caught up in an accident, but was able to somewhat recover towards the later stages of the race. And then we actually saw Joey Logano get involved in a spin as well on one of those later race cautions. He might have been the final caution before the overtime restart, but Joey Logano, very rough stretch right now. He is not running good. He's not showing any speed. And I was saying the same thing about Kyle Busch, but I've seen some speed out of Kyle Busch. I've seen him run up front at Las Vegas, last week at Dover, this week at Kansas. Now the concern is starting to shift off of Kyle Busch just a little bit. You know, we still have that Kyle Busch concern. He still hasn't got a win. One of the best drivers in NASCAR. Same thing for Joey Logano, two-time champion, doesn't have a win, has not won since Atlanta last season, early in the season last year. And then, unfortunately, he's not even running up front. I mean, we're seeing him outside the top 20 consistently. The threat is real for Joey Logano to miss the playoffs. We're going to have to keep an eye on that, right? So we're going to have to continue to follow that moving forward. Very rough day for Joey Logano there. And then, unfortunately, I think it was Austin Dillon that got spun on the final lap. I never saw a replay completely from Fox, but I'll try to at least cover it a little bit. I think Dillon was outside the top 20 most of the day, got in the top 20, then got spun and turned in the outside wall. A heavy hit there for Austin Dillon. If I can find a clip of it, I'll put it up. But I know Dillon got spun on the final lap. Wanted to mention that as well. So certainly this race had it all. We had the battling for the lead all race long, battling for position all race long. We had a couple of big crashes. Everybody seems to be okay, which is certainly good. And then, of course, we had the closest finish in NASCAR history, which is fantastic as well. So overall, just a really exciting day, very exciting race to talk about from start to finish. Let's just look at the playoff grid really quickly. Once again, we're only 12 races out of 26 complete, so we have a long ways to go. This grid will continue to shift, especially in the lower portions or on that right side of the playoff grid. It will continue to shift a lot, but once again, this moves Larson up to third on the playoff grid. Daniel Suarez is actually, I think, outside the top 16 in points. The only driver with the win outside the top 16 in points, but he does have that win to put him in there. You have Truex, like I said, he's second in regular season points. He's 155 in. No threat of him missing it whatsoever. But you look at guys like Chase Briscoe, who's still on the bubble. Brad Keselowski, we expect him to get in. I mean, his teammate almost won today. Yeah, Bubba Wallace still a few points out, has had trouble the last few weeks. Bubba Wallace has. We expect 23-11 to have both cars in the playoffs. It would be upsetting if Bubba Wallace doesn't get in. We'll see if the speed can pick up. But we always talk about a lot of teams. Like I mentioned Joey Logano as well. We talk about how we expect teams to get better, but not every team can be good, right? I mean, not every team can finish in the top 10 every week. So when a team does step up and get a little bit better, that means another team has somewhere fallen off a little bit. So we have to continue to watch that moving into race 13 next week at Darlington. So once again, next week, talk about how great this race was. We go to Darlington next week. That was a crazy race last year. That might be I would say that was the hardest track in NASCAR is Darlington, but I'm super excited. I was really pumped to watch this race today. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. A great race. We had the 3.5 hour rain delay to start it, which was certainly a bummer, but then we got to see the lights come on and a fantastic finish. What a race. What a day. And please like and subscribe if you like the video. Share the video if you can. If you do, I really appreciate it. And of course, about Kyle Busch coming from 20th and finishing 8th in 2 laps. Let's get rowdy.